Hi, everybody. I'm Sue Hillyard, and I'm here with Rav Chahal, and we are doing another episode in our interviews up close and personal with your favorite astrologers. And today, our favorite astrologer is Steve Wolfson. Hi, Steve.
Hello.
It's great to have
Hi,
you
Steve.
here.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, absolutely. And Steve has been very kind to allow us to talk about and display his chart as we go on this journey with him and talk about. Let's start, I guess, with how did you get to astrology and where does it show in your chart? Big
Well,
question.
starting with the latter, I haven't really thought about the latter part, but I do have an 11th house south node. So I do two things. I do astrology and I do computer work, web development, and they're both 11th house things. So I guess that's where it comes from. Uh, what was the first part of the question?
How did you get to astrology and
Oh, okay.
what
Well,
has your journey been with astrology?
that's not a short answer.
I know.
Um, I'll, I'll,
That's the whole.
I'll see about doing the capsule summary. So, I have been an 11th house sort of person for starting in my mid-teens, I guess, where I had the good fortune to be born at a time where I was a teenager, what I think is good fortune, of as the 1960s were exploding. And I basically didn't, was not originally of that kind of mindset, but uh, as I put it one day, as I watched it happen, I watched the demon rock and roll enter my soul, and I have never been the same. In other words, a song hit me in a way that it a lot enlivened things in me that I had been very oblivious to. I was a very sensitive and smart and very shy child. Um, and This started a process that um, when I was, it led me to when I was 15 years old, of making my first trip to Greenwich Village in Manhattan,
Wow.
and having the experience of like, whoa, I don't know what this is going on here, but this is the first place in my whole life I have felt like I was at home. Um,
I love it.
and so I began going there quite a bit while I was in high school. And this, now the 60s Greenwich Village scene is famous and all this, but there was one club that allowed teenagers in. I didn't know until many years later that this was because due to politics, they couldn't get a liquor license. So otherwise they wouldn't have allowed teenagers in, but this was the good fortune. Uh, the capsule summary is I saw this guy one night playing guitar with his little band that just was absolutely out of this world, unbelievable, blew me away. Um, and about 7 months later, he resurfaced in England where his name was Jimi Hendrix.
Oh, wow.
And so this was playing everything Jimi Hendrix did before stadium fulls of people in a little club with about 50 people.
Wow.
And
Lucky you.
I walked out of there really literally mumbling to myself, what was that? Um, so that was an extreme experience, but I had that. This led to I basically managed to get myself to San Francisco to Haight-Ashbury in the summer of Lev, the famous event. And I was only there 6 weeks, but I literally, I've said many times, I have never been the same. What I saw going on there in terms of, I mean, obviously I idealized it and all this, but the essence of what I'm talking about was there. A sense of community, of belonging, of people doing things to help the larger family. And they were all, I mean, the media call them hippies, but a lot of the times in those days, we referred to each other as the freaks, meaning the people that were different. Um, and I spent 2 days on a commune there, and I was 18. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I was supposed to go to college. I had no interest in going to college. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I saw this commune, and it was overrun with people during that summer, but I saw a few people here and there that were kind of doing the work quietly, holding the place together. And I was like, that's what I want to do. I can relate to that. Now, 11th House South Node, hello. So this led to, along the way, I did go to Woodstock Festival, which was also a profound experience, but I didn't, the music and all that and the crowd and all that was phenomenal, but I don't know, it was a mixed blessing for me because, as I put it, I watched a 600-acre beautiful farm be turned into a mud pit in one weekend. And that was part of it also, but what went on there was profound as an, like, there's all these people that feel this way. Oh my God, all in one place at one time. You know, it was a generational thing. So then I spent 10 years. I finally found a commune that I had started looking for in California, and I spent 10 years there. And it turned out it was a cult, but I learned from that cults are not all horrible things. I mean, sometimes they do. The leaders tend to be weird. It doesn't mean that everybody that's there is like that, because there's a lot of very idealistic young people that are motivated, that can't relate to what's going on, that want to do something different, create something different. And that's what we were in the beginning, but it got changed when our leader wanted to become a rock star and got on a first name basis with cocaine. So that was a whole experience. And then after 10 years of that, it's like, well, out into the real world, quote, real world. So adapting to that. And I did that, you know, like, as I think I said, real for, you know, the normal real world for me wound up buying a 6-acre property with a 1770 farmhouse on it, which was not in Maine, which was not exactly your most common lifestyle choice. But I had a wife who, you know, we liked it, so we did that. So then we had a difficult marriage, and after about in the mid 90s, it started falling apart. The marriage started falling apart. We had each wanted to end it, but it was never quite right. But all of a sudden, it was time. And so I moved out. I had kind of isolated myself, and I began reconnecting with old friends, a lot of them from the commune era. And one of them told me she had been studying astrology for 20 years. And at the time, let me put it this way, I thought there was something to astrology, and I knew more or less basic sun sign astrology. You know, Virgo means this and Scorpio means that and so forth. But I didn't really know the details. And the irony was my wife had been studying esoteric astrology and tarot and numerology, and I never really had that much interest in it. And so jumping ahead a little bit. So not that many years later, all of a sudden I am an astrologer. and, and she's like, what happened? um, but this friend of mine told me that, you know, as you can see, I have a 4-degree Sag ascendant, and Pluto was heading towards that. And my friend told me that I had Pluto coming to my ascendant, and I was like, that's nice. What's it mean? And she told me basically, your whole life as you've known it is going to change. And uh, people that have thought they know you well are not going to understand who you are or what's happened to you. And that proved to be pretty prophetic, actually. Um, I, as I said, I had left the marriage. I was working at the time at a company that was an offshoot of our commune. I was allowed, I always had an aptitude for computers, so I was allowed to develop that aptitude. But my life literally blew up. Uh, it was a death rebirth. And if you haven't really experienced death rebirth, you're in death and you have no clue that there's ever going to be rebirth. Um, Oh, I can add to that that you will note that my Chiron is at 6 degrees Sag, in addition to my ascendant being 4 degrees Sag. So it was pretty intense for about 4 or 5 years. But it threw me on the growth path because I had no idea what was going on in my life or what I wanted. Or where I was going. And I think I was 44 when this was all happening. And when I was 44, 44 felt pretty darn old. uh, um, and it's like, I don't know what's going on. And it was a low point because it was like, I mean, there were some nights I was living by myself. There were a few nights where it's like, I don't have a personality that is going to take myself out. But if you have any openings on the bus home, if you toss a ticket my way, I'll be okay with that. Uh, it didn't happen. And about 5 years later, one day, I heard myself uttering, I can't believe I'm about to say this, but I actually feel gratitude for all that I have been through in the last 5 years because it has made me into a person that I'm really liking, that I'm becoming, and I can see that this wouldn't have happened if I hadn't gone through all this. And after I finished that, something took over my body and put my hands over my mouth and said, "Shut up, what are you saying?" And there you have the soul and the personality. And, I learned from this. And I mean, the irony of it is, I'm asking, what does Pluto over my ascendant mean? And about 7 years later, I am now a Pluto astrologer. Like, what? Um, so I've, I had to experience this. So, okay, so I can go on and on. But so where did the astrology come into this? Um, I was looking for what the next phase of my life was going to be. I had moved, I had connected with a friend I used to know back in the commune days, and we were in relationship, and she had moved to an island off the coast of Australia, and she was, was visiting in New England, and she wanted me to move there with her. So she stayed with me for about 6 months, and was like, you need to make up your mind because I'm going back home. So I was about 50 then, and I was like, I think aren't I getting a little old for this? This jumping around. But I said, okay, I'm going. So we went. We didn't know how long we were going to stay there. It turned out we only stayed there a few months. But we came back and went to the West Coast. And I've been here ever since. And so I'm in Ashland, Oregon, which is a kind of a spiritual center kind of place where a lot of progressive people live. Sedona's famous for it, but it's that kind of town. And I said, okay, so why am I here? I mean, I felt like I had been stationed there by life, but why am I here? So and because I had been in therapy for 4 or 5 years when I was going through all that, and I was having conversations with people about growth and change and all this, and I realized that's my interest. That's what I care about. That's what I want to do. I want to work with people with this stuff because I've been through this. I had this experience when I was around 50 because I had learned by then there was this thing called Chiron, and there's a thing called the Chiron return. And when you have Chiron on your ascendant, I had learned, well, that's significant. The book I read said a lot of well-known New Age healers have this kind of first house Chiron placement. Like, well, that's interesting. So it was very interesting because around the time I turned 50, approximately, I don't remember exactly the age when that return occurred, but I was walking around mumbling for a while, something like, I don't know what's happening here, but I'm suddenly getting wise. Like, I just started understanding stuff. I didn't know where it was coming from. And I attributed a lot of it in retrospect, in hindsight, to the Chiron return. Because it's like Chiron is our wounding. And so the point of having wounded, being aware of wounding, is to heal the wounding. And so Chiron is this healing intention. And it's like the way I verbalize it is when you've gone around the cycle one time, all 50 years, you've seen the whole process. You know how it works. So when you are experiencing it again, the things, the steps, the stages, you can recognize them. And thus you can have a different relationship to them because they're not throwing you totally for a loop. It's like, oh, there's a pattern here because I've been here before, this type of thing. So I look at that, at this point, I look at that Chiron placement, especially in Sag, as shamanic in nature, by its nature. And what is a shaman? I have for a long time used the metaphor. If you go to Nepal and you want to trek in the Himalayas, which I have not done, but I like the metaphor, you can either stumble around on your own or you can hire a Sherpa who knows the terrain to help guide you through and show you where to go and what to avoid. And that's kind of the way I have learned to look at this principle of shamanism. It's like not theory, it's based on experience. It's someone who has walked that road and has learned the hard way how, meaning trial and error, how to walk that road. Therefore, they can help you and give you reassurance on your journey, but they can't do your journey for you, but they can reassure you that you're on your journey and that it's going to turn out okay no matter what comes up. Because sometimes when we're in the midst of it, we do not feel certain that it's going to turn out okay. We may not like what we have to go through, but it will wind up being okay in the biggest picture. So anyway, I was looking at two different, I discovered in my internet searches this website of this guy, Jeffrey Wolf Green. And I was kind of drawn, there were some things about it I was drawn to, and some things about it I was like, I don't know. And I was interested in one other thing that was called, what the heck was it called? I can't remember, but it was some kind of hypnotherapy modality that somebody in California was teaching, which was, I don't remember if it included past life regressions. It might have, but it was not your basic, lose weight through hypnosis kind of thing. It was deeper than that. So I was looking at both of these things, and I kept getting drawn back to Jeffrey's site. And I bought his Pluto Volume 1, and I really ate it up. There were things in it that were speaking my language. It was a language I didn't even know I had at that point, but they were resonating. And at a certain point, I wrote to him. And, you can write to famous people and they usually don't answer you. But like in 20 minutes, I had a response from him, a very good response. And so I got drawn more into it, and I eventually met him. And we have a pretty close karmic past, I would put it that way. And so I began studying EA for real. Went to Pluto School in Boulder. I think, yeah, was it in Boulder? I think so. And, I got more and more involved with it. On the message board, I started doing, I think I redid the website. And I co-hosted or co-produced at least one, maybe two EA conferences. Well, I know we were going to do one in Ashland, that fell through, but we did one up near Portland. And that's how I got into astrology. And I was, all about it. And I was involved in we had an NCGR group here in Southern Oregon. So I was involved in that. I think I was the vice president. And they had all different kinds of astrology there. In the beginning, I thought that astrology was kind of like a science, like where if you have a science, like there's chemistry or something, there are generally accepted principles. This is where everybody looks at it. They may not agree with all of it, but nobody questions the foundations. But I learned that astrology is more like an art than a science. Even though I think there is a science to it, but I don't think that's necessarily. I don't know how much that's. I don't know what my feelings are about how much that's practiced. I'll put it that way. So I noticed, because with the NCGR group, and every month we had meetings, different speakers, and I noticed over time, like evolutionary astrology was what I was interested in. The other astrologies didn't really speak to me that much. And so at a certain point, I dropped out of that. Like, I'm just going to focus on this. and on EA, because that's what speaks to my heart. It speaks to my soul. And I did a lot of it. Did a lot of readings. I was known as that EA astrologer. So about 10, 12 years later, things started shifting, and I started seeing places where I wasn't necessarily living or practicing the essence of what I was telling other people EA was about and what they need to do. It's like, and so it started a long phase of, which I'm still in, of I feel like it led me to a certain point in my unfolding, and then it started shifting. It's like I had to start applying it to myself, and particularly shadow, and I'm not even call it shadow work. Shadow to me is, and Carl Jung is, not that I don't know Carl Jung's works uh, tremendously deep or anything, but I just know from my own experience he has the essence of it, which is, the way I put it now is, we have 8 billion people on this planet, and every one of us is wounded and has various wounds ranging from not that much to humongous, depending on the individuals and what they have experienced, and including in their past lives, brought into this life. And that our real work, we try to break free from it. We're trained in much of the spiritual movements to just be positive, you know. Shame and anger and greed and hatred and pride and all this are negative emotions, and we don't want anything to do with negative emotions. We only want positive, loving, kind emotions. And yet the irony is, there's nobody that isn't filled with, quote, negative emotions, which we have learned to repress, to avoid, to ignore, to project onto other people. To me, jumping ahead, the movement that is afoot in the United States at this point in time that just occurred is essentially about projecting all of my own wounds and pain and crap onto other people and making them the cause of what I'm feeling. The growth is realizing I am the cause of what I am feeling. In other words, if I am reacting to something, if I have a very strong reaction to something that somebody does or says, the reason I have a strong reaction to that particular thing is not about them. There's something in me. It doesn't mean I'm wrong. It means I have a wound there. Something has happened there. And I don't want to feel that because it makes me feel crappy about myself. So we develop these defenses to ward it off, where to ward off the shame and the hurt and the pain that we all have to varying degrees below the surface. And in polite society, everybody learns how to smile and dress well and act like none of this exists. And that's the problem. I have some innate ability or gift to be able to look at photos most of the time and see what's actually going on in somebody. And, I see 50,000 photos of people smiling, where what I see on their face is anything but smiling. And you're not allowed to feel those things because they're downers, man. So for me at this point, astrology is a tool. It helps me see how someone is put together, thus where their wounds might stem from. And that what we all need is not criticism, not shame, not being told how bad we are, but to honor what each of us has been through that has resulted in the places where we feel messed up or confused or angry. Because all the rage and violence and all this can only come out of anger, right? Repressed anger. And it's like blowing off steam, but it doesn't really get to the root of it. The root of it is, what is my relationship with myself? How did I get to be the way that I am? It's not my fault, and it's not anybody else's fault, because the people that are angry or the parents that didn't understand and all this, they could not have been any way other than the way they were because of their own experiences. So who can change this? The only person that can change this for me is me. I have needed and need and get a lot of support from others who are on a what I call a parallel journey, who have come to these kind of realizations in their own way. That it's not about what we've been taught about. That's not an answer. It's not a solution. Readjusting the external, sometimes it's necessary because it's when it's so overwhelmingly painful, yeah, you can't really grow or evolve. But it's the internal that we need to adjust. And that is the big change I feel that is upon our world. And I feel this is, I don't even know how to express it in astrological symbolism, because in some ways I feel like the change that's upon us is actually bigger than astrological symbolism. That there's this vast uplifting of the energies of the consciousness that is coming in at this time and is only going to accelerate. Pluto and Aquarius is going to dramatically accelerate it, but I don't think it's only I don't think it's only because of Pluto and Aquarius. I mean, I've heard people say something like, life is changing its tune. I don't think that's quite it either. Sometimes I wonder if we're traveling through an area in the universe where the natural energies are simply higher. In this multi-million billion years of cycles of all this stuff that's moving around the physical universe. I don't know if that's it, but I know the profound rise in consciousness is upon us, and it is driving people insane because they feel what they have had, what they have known, shifting away. And it may take us out of things. You may be in North Carolina in a spiritual town and have your bloody house disappear overnight and your whole neighborhood and half your town. So the old-fashioned explanation for this that we have been told is well, it's your bad karma. This is because of all the things you did in your past lives. I bought into that, but I don't see it that way. What has changed my life is the growing. I'm what I call a graduating eighth house Pluto. Okay, if you're a graduating eighth house Pluto, you have seen a whole lot. I feel you have seen a whole lot of abandonment, violation of trust, betrayal, and all of this. It's heavy, heavy stuff. You do not walk around expecting, subconsciously, expecting everything to be love and light and air. But the realization that grows that everything that has happened is to help us grow, expand, and evolve, even things that humanly are unbearable. Deaths of those we love, of your house burning down, your city burning down, a war starting in your backyard, all this kind of stuff, trauma inducing, all this. Not saying you should sit or expecting anybody's going to sit there going, I am so grateful that my entire life just got wrecked. That's not how we're going to respond. But it has an opportunity built into it over the long term. Why was this necessary? What is the point? What was the point? And we don't know the answer. That's one of my, how do I put this? I've noticed that to a certain extent, people that are into astrology can get into more or less using it to try to predict what is going to happen, which is a subtle way of trying to control life. I think there's value in it to a point. It's like we look at the weather map. If it's going to be absolutely pouring next Thursday, well, it's good for me to know about that. But let's put it this way, the weather predictions are so rarely super accurate, right? It's dry here. They tell us, well, we're going to have 4 days in a row with 1/3 of an inch of rain. Well, we have one day with 1/10 of an inch. It's sunny the next day, and we get a little bit of rain the other days. And my point is, predictions can only be so accurate because we're not in control. And why do we want to be in control? Because we're afraid. We have, I've learned a little bit of neurobiology. We have a nervous system whose function is to keep us alive. We're wired like that. That's not a mistake. Its job is to make sure that nothing bad happens to me. That's the fight, flight, freeze response. What is the most effective way for me to remain alive? Those are also the cause of trauma or symptoms of trauma, right? Because we're trying to stay alive and safe. We're supposed to. But so it's not going away. The way I have learned it is I form a different relationship with those experiences because little by little I begin to trust the process of life, that life knows what it's doing, that life actually loves us, all of us, even our wayward children, like the one whose name I won't mention, who's in the news a lot. It's, it's great to talk to moms in this way because they understand. It's like there are times when a loving mom has to make their children do things that the child is not going to like doing. They would not be a good parent if they didn't do this, and it causes pain in the child, and the child isn't going to like it. And we can feel crappy about the fact that we have to do it. And not doing it because I don't want the child to experience pain means the child's not going to be prepared for adulthood in certain ways. So I just envision what we call the divine mother or the goddess as this energy of love. We are the children and we are learning. and we do stupid things. We don't think they're stupid when we're doing them. In retrospect, we go, how could I have done that? Well, I had to do it. That's how I learned not to do it. I had to experience it. I had to experience the consequences. Then I evolved. That's wisdom. I made mistakes. I learned something from it. That's, to me, the root of compassion. I've done all these stupid things. I can have what I see now as stupid. I can hold compassion for other people who perhaps are not that far along on that path of learning, of experience, of wisdom.
So my comment on this, let me interject something just real quick, is that not only do you have Chiron on the ascendant, but you have Chiron's wife, Chariklo, conjunct as well. So as that Pluto came down, and also Cassandra is at 8 degrees of Sagittarius. Cassandra is about finding our voice and losing our voice and finding our voice. And so as this Pluto came down all the way around here, and look where it's coming to, the ruler of your ascendant, but at the same time, it went all over all of your Gemini and, continued in and, into opposing, Cancer and your Pallas is here. And so it's the polarity point of Pluto, and you're fighting for the emotion for people to express the emotion. Steve, the voice that you have brought us is just incredible. I mean, all of your Gemini maybe in the 7th house, you think of other people and you express for other people what's going on. And I mean, for Pluto now to be coming to the Jupiter that rules, all of this Sagittarius, I just find it incredible.
Thank you.
Can I just add something just on the back of that, Sue? Steve, you mentioned that you're at a point where you're getting people to look within. Your inner is attracting the outer. Look at the 2nd house. It's about going within, self-worth, what you value. So that transit, once it's been building to your natal Jupiter retrograde, I wonder whether you're going to start having just these sudden visions and just recollection of, just knowledge that you naturally have. You're a daemon soul through and through. Look at the mutable axis in your chart. 100% daemon soul. You talk about being sensitive as a child. It's because you've been born into this environment, coming away from God, goddess, into the earthly experience is trauma in itself. And you mentioned this, we're all 8 billion of us experience this trauma where we've separated ourselves to grow, to evolve. And just on back of what Sue said, it's that voice. It's sort of like you're trying to get people to listen to themselves, that inner dialogue that's going on. Like, I've just been listening to you for the last 45 minutes, and I've just sat here and just getting a lot more insights. And honestly, I could just listen to this and I don't even need to talk, because there's this just growth happening for me. And I'm an evolutionary astrologer, as you know, but stuff that I'm continuously learning and information that's coming up. And it's just being that beacon, that, that light source for people. And I feel it's just going to get more stronger for you. I think it's just going to open up a lot more doors. And you mentioned earlier, you were like, oh, 44, 45, this is old. But what life is teaching everybody is age is just a physical number on earth from the moment we were born. We're continuously evolving till the moment we take our last breath. And that's the awareness I also think really brings to people, where evolution is continuously going to happen. And it's how we react to it, how we deal with it, and how we move through it. that emotional body that, EA mentions, that we have to move through that emotional body. Yeah, I just wanted to add that. And yeah, it's what an amazing journey you're having so
Yeah,
far.
thank you. Yeah, it's interesting. You just helped me realize something, because I've talked about when I was 44, I was like, I felt old. And I said when I was 50 and I was asked to move to Australia, I'm like, aren't I getting too old for this? And now I'm 75 going, I don't know, do I still have another chapter left? Which you just got me to realize it's the same thing.
Yes.
So, so the answer is yes. And see, the difference is now, and not in a perfect way, but I have less and less need to try to control the process. It's no longer about what do I want to do, as I call it in the modern age, my 30,000 Facebook followers or all this kind of stuff. It's like, life, what is it you want me to do? And I'm thick. You got to present it to me in ways that I can't possibly overlook. Maybe I needed to hear it 5 times. So present it to me. What's the next steps that you're asking for? I mean, I feel in a lot of ways, I and many of us are in a rest period now and have been. I know I've been, literally rarely left my house since the pandemic started. It's been a very internal time. As I tell a friend of mine who feels this stuff and is like, oh my God, what's going on with me? I said, well, true or false? You hear about so many yogis in India that spent years living in caves. What's the difference? It's like there's a time to be in and there's a time to be out. And there's a lot of integration that occurs in the times that are in, is my conclusion. And I do feel within a few, from the astrology, I do feel within a few years, not just for me in general, it's we're gonna be starting to see more of the out. And I feel like the reaction to the recent action is going to be building strength. And this is going on all over the world. I mean, the model for the people that just won in this country is what happened in Hungary, which took a democratic country and turned it into an autocracy. And they think that's wonderful. So I feel this goes on all levels, because I feel like the deepest level where, in other words, what is it? To some extent, there's this saying about certain things are like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, meaning you can move the furniture around, but if the boat is on course to sinking, it's going to sink. And those actions are not really going to create any, not that they're wrong, but they're not really going to create the change that you want. And to me, I don't feel like the world at large is ready for a mass waking up of, oh my God, I need to start dealing with my shadow. But I feel like those of us who are on this journey and have been on this journey, first of all, it's going to greatly accelerate for us because we're tuned into it, sensitive to it, and seeking it. And the people are going to need a lot of guidance. And that's what I was referring to. One of the questions on here, which I've been talking too long, I don't know if we're going to get to them, but one of the, I just lost my train of thought. This is what happens when you're 75.
That's okay.
And it's, I was,
I'm
I
seeing
was,
that as your Mercury retrograde, not your age, just,
Well, and a
not your
lot
age.
of data
Thank you.
Yes.
and the directory being, having to locate a lot of points of data.
It's very interesting because over the last few years, I've noticed, because I have a joke about it, which I love, which is I used to have a photographic memory. I think I can't remember. I think I did. But I started noticing when I began talking to more people that were in their 70s that, because I was like, oh my God, am I, precursor Alzheimer's or something over the last few years. But I started noticing everybody that I talked to that was at or past a certain age talked about that there were changes in their memory. So it's like, okay, it's a normal function. It's a normal function of a human incarnation. It's interesting because I find wisdom accumulating and developing out of my life experiences. And I find many people feel this way. So I say we give up our good looks when we're young for some wisdom, and it's a good deal.
Well, you know what, Steve? I also see it. See, I also was in IT, and I had to, and I have a Gemini moon, and I had to, what people called multitask, which is just serial, doing one thing rapidly right after another, and having to make snap decisions on what's important and what's urgent, and et cetera. And with all the Gemini that you have been, collecting all kinds of data and dealing with all kinds of information. And it's no wonder that it would swirl around at some point and and funnel over maybe into the Sagittarius point and become wisdom. It assimilates. And I think at some point that I totally agree with you about worrying about it being Alzheimer's, the onset of Alzheimer's. But I also I recognize that for me, this started 30, 40 years ago, where I would do things almost on automatic pilot, one thing after another. And then I'd go, oh, did I do such and such? And I'd go back and check, and yeah, sure enough, I did, but I'd already forgotten about it. So if
Yes.
if that
Yes.
helps any.
Yes, yes. I mean, I just find it's amped up for me. I'll put it that way.
I can imagine.
And it's, it's okay. I mean, it's just what is. It's like the way it happens.
Well,
Another one.
and with Jupiter going over that in in the last year or so, it magnifies it even more for you.
If I want, through what you just said, if I want to get astrological about it, I could say, well, I do have Mercury retrograde. Maybe it took me my whole life to start losing some of the information. It's, but yeah, it's just noticing these things. I mean, I learned to smile at them. It's like, it's part of this whole process. And the more that I see, it's a old Bob Dylan line from many, many years ago. He not busy being born is busy dying. Meaning, as soon as we're born, we're on the trajectory to, it's, to put it really humorously, it's all downhill from here. But I don't mean that in any serious way. But that's the way it works. And it's like, the more that it becomes more than theory to me, but experience, that who am I really, truly? I am a soul who has created this persona. And the beauty of the way that it works is like the script, just like being in a movie or a dream. And the script is so compelling, you actually completely forget that you are a character playing a role in this. And I mean, that's astounding. Like, where did this come from? How is this even possible? And there's, you know, that to me is where the appreciation and gratitude is the source, or the root of appreciation and gratitude. Like, wow, I get to participate in this crazy journey. And I'm not just in the audience watching it, you know, I'm part of this journey. And
you're one of the actors on the stage.
yeah. And you know, I get a certain amount of say in the script, or as I put it, you know, it's kind of like I get to choose whether I want the red one or the blue one. And so from that perspective, I find that a whole lot of fear drops away, because you, it's another one. I have this, what I call eighth house sort of sense of humor, Scorpio kind of humor.
Gallows
It's like,
humor.
yeah, gallows humor. It's like when people are, you know, I was like, death, afraid of dying, don't know dying, da da da. And like, dying's not the problem. Living is the problem. There's no way out of this. You're going to come back here and keep doing this until you get it to the point where you're satisfied with it. So it's like the more we allow that perspective to sink in, the easier I find it is to take, or it makes more sense, the things that we have to go through. That's the way I experience it.
Yeah,
I
our
don't,
soul is in charge.
yeah, I don't, you know, I don't like everything I have to go through. I'm not required. That's the thing. I'm not required to like everything I go through. That's liberating. I just need to be willing. It's like to come to the point of surrender, which doesn't mean to become like a robot, but I'm not in charge. Past a certain point, I'm not in charge. So when I reach that point where it just feels like I'm not in charge, it's like, I don't know what to do here. So I give this up. That's what I said before. Show me. I'm dense. Show me so clearly that I can't miss it. And I'm not stupid or wrong because I don't know, because it's beyond. Oh, that's another thing about predictions. Okay. We are my perspective on predictions. The evolutionary journey is always taking us from the level of consciousness and awareness we have now into a greater consciousness and awareness. I have no bleeping idea what that greater awareness and consciousness looks like or feels like. So anything I predict about what might be coming is coming from my known reality, because I don't know where it's going to be coming from. It's taking me there to show me more than I know. So in certain ways, and I'm not saying all predictions are stupid and useless. I'm not saying that. But when we're trying to guess or encapsulate what the future might be or is going to be, we can only do this through, unless we have a true vision. But if we're just going on my experience, I'm going to be projecting the known onto the unknown. And that means I'm going to be limiting I'm not limiting the unknown. The unknowns are still going to occur. But it's unlikely to occur the way I think it's going to occur. I'll put it that way.
Yep.
So then I come to, well, what's the point? The more useful thing is not trying to say what it's going to be like, is to show, to demonstrate or show how do I accept and be okay with uncertainty and not knowing. Because that's what we have trouble with, because that sets off our nervous system. I don't know what's going to happen. Oh my God, eighth house. The bottom line on anything is I could die from this. That's the bottom line fear. We don't go there that often, but if you boil it all down, that's what it comes down to. I could die.
Yep. And that's the fear. I mean,
Right.
that's the fear underlying a lot of,
Right. So if we get the bigger picture of the continuity of life and that there's no end to it, where it's not just a theory and new age aphorisms, but we actually grok it, viscerally experience it in our cells. Oh, there's more going on here. I can trust life. I don't know where it's taking me, but it's going to be better for me in the long run, even if right now I am scared to shit of what it is, where it seems like it wants me to go.
So how's that for an explanation of, your progressed Neptune in the eighth house and progressed Sun and Pluto just coming out of a progressed conjunction? I don't know where it's going, but it's not going to end here.
This is my point. I didn't need to know that to say what I said. That's my whole point. That's a validation. That's
exactly.
That is, and there is validation is good. There's a need for, I find there's a need for validation, or it's helpful if I'm really stepping out of my known because I feel guided or prompted to. Of course, I'm going to feel insecure. Of course, all my worst, whatever, fears, doubts, whatnot. I mean, I had a little bit of it coming up before this. Anytime I speak, oh my God, what am I going to do? Blah, blah, blah. And I don't mean to make fun of it. I mean, those are wounded, hurt parts of myself. But I have learned over time that I almost always do okay, or even better than okay, when I speak. So it's just a nervousness that appears ahead of it because I'm being vulnerable. And in vulnerability, bad things might happen. Somebody's going to listen to this and think I'm the biggest idiot they ever heard. That's kind of a given.
Of course.
So, and usually they don't tell me about it, but they might.
You never know.
Then I have to deal with my own doubt and insecurity. But what I'm learning is, instead of running and hiding and being ashamed of doubt and insecurity, each time this happens is actually an opportunity to grow even more, because I get to look at my own trigger and what is it in me that is triggered? Why am I having this reaction? Because there's someplace in me that's wounded. And when we get triggered, that is the wounded place that takes over our biological apparatus. it hijacks our conscious brain, it hijacks our nervous system, and it has us acting like from a place in us that we're 3 or 5 or 7 years old, because that's where the wound is. So instead of pushing that away or refusing to admit that, well, I'm hijacked, you know, I'm just fine, it's you, that's the defense. There's something there for me to learn. So what I find for community, for people I want to be around, for people I want to spend time with, I want to spend time around people who have come to, or I aspire to spend time around people who have come to realize some of their own triggers, because an awareness, a consciousness, because it takes self-love. This is what I found. I did not have self-love. I mean, you know, I was branded in childhood as an angry child, angry child, angry child, angry child. The parents told everybody how angry I was, blah, blah, blah. What do you think my relationship with anger would be?
No, I'm not.
Do I want to express anger? It's the last thing. But do I feel things deeply that piss me off? Look at what just happened. Do I like this? No. But I've learned some skill around appropriate expressions of anger, because it's not, just to pick on you, Sue, just because you're looking there, and it's nothing, this is totally hypothetical and it's not anything that happened. You said something, if you said something that set off something in me, and my response would be, or in the old days it would have been, to get defensive, push back, you know, oh yeah, what about you, blah, blah, blah. None of this happened. That's totally hypothetical. I forgot why I started saying that. Let's see.
The anger.
It's versus a conscious or more mature approach is, hey, Sue, you know, something in what you just said has set something off in me, and I don't know exactly what it is. And, you know, are you willing, you know, will you help me process this?
Yeah.
Just by, because I want to draw out what is, there's something in me that was hit by the way you said something. Maybe it reminded me of something, the way somebody talked to me when I was a kid. So that's the difference. It's not like we're not all going to all agree all the time and all this, but it's like developing mature skills in how to process uncomfortable emotion and feeling. And believe me, I started with complete emotional repression, 4 planets in Gemini, mental. So it's been most of my emotional education has, not surprisingly, come from my interactions with females.
I find it interesting that you had that your Uranus went back in or progressed forward into Cancer, as has your Mars at this point too. So
right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's, you know, reclaiming my emotional nature. I think that's probably part of the unworkings of Mercury retrograde, because I could hide behind information because I was smart and I knew all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I could argue and debate and all that. And I still can, but that's one of the gifts of not having as much memory is I can't remember some of the things I would fight back with. Right? See, life is wise; it knows what it's doing.
We have similar parallel paths in some ways. And as you talk about the emotion and the defensiveness, I can definitely, feel that. I have a lot of cancer, so I can feel it, and I'm as well trying to process where that originally, where it was re-triggered in my early life, because it's I've done, I've gotten involved with deep memory process, past life regression with Patricia Walsh. And, I'm a big believer that we bring, a lot of this emotion from past lives, and, trying to synthesize it at this point, and understand, the previous lives that fed into, the then trigger that happened in early childhood.
Well, guys, I have natal Mars in Cancer, so I resonate.
That you do.
I do.
And it's being transited now.
I find that Mars in Cancer is very interesting in that Cancer is so unbelievably sensitive, and Mars can be warlike.
It is not.
And yeah, and it's a very interesting combination. And it's almost, I look at it kind of like the Cancer part is like this very delicate, feminine, sensitive energy, and the Mars is like the protector of that energy. It's not going to let it be messed up.
A double shell.
Yeah,
Maybe.
Yeah.
And mine sits in the 10th house, and it's actually the ruler of my moon in Capricorn. So, yeah.
Right.
I totally understand that. And that has actually been a lifetime process, and it still is a process of, like, for me, even the work I do in the world has to have an emotional connection. I have to have an emotional connection to it, whatever it's been in the past as well, in terms of the career I've come to, being an astrologer. But also, I also do other work, which is to do with books. We'll get to that question soon.
Yeah.
And because I am,
now I see where the question came from. Yes.
But yeah, so that has to be an emotional resonance. But it was through evolutionary astrology I realized I had to get back into the emotional body to understand where maybe I was putting up the barriers, maybe where I was trying to control too much, or thinking control was the right way to deal with the emotions. Sometimes you have to let the emotions through, not reacting to other people, but kind of figuring out how to deal with it yourself. For me, writing's a big thing. I've always written blogs, just getting stuff out onto paper. I was writing this morning. I'd gone into London, coffee shop, sat down, thought I was writing a little note. I ended up writing 3 pages of A4, just feelings, emotions that were coming up. But that's healing for me, and that works for me.
Yes.
And I think people need to figure out, rather than reacting and projecting onto others, how to work through those emotions. And your birth chart's a great place to start. You can figure out exactly how the soul wants to navigate, but just acknowledging the emotions rather than repressing what society, like you said earlier, Steve, look at social media. People will be quick to put up, I'm having a great day, positive. This is all positive. Rarely do you see people being vulnerable, and unless they're seeking attention. Majority of the time is just to seek a little bit of attention.
And when they are vulnerable, they have 6 people telling them what's wrong with them.
Exactly.
Right. There's a great book, and I wish I can't think of the name of it, but the author, I think her name was Karla McLaren, but it has to do with feeling your emotions and letting them go through you, which I thought was really interesting. She talks about, you know, all of the different emotions and how to let them go through you and not, you know, not judge them, but you know, just to allow them.
I'll do my research and find the book for you, Sue, so we
Yeah,
can add
I
it to the
have it
notes.
here. I can't
Oh, do you?
remember. In
I
fact,
can't
it
see
used
it.
to be right here on but I've rearranged my books. But yeah. So
This
okay, so
starts,
let's see. Before we wrap up, I want to say one more thing about what I started with the with Caraclo and
Sandra.
Cassandra and Chiron being on your ascendant. Now in progression, it's passed over your midheaven and into your ninth house. And here you are teaching us all how to do what you've been working
How
on.
to do life. How to do life.
well, I would phrase it more like changing the way we respond to life, seeing life from a deeper perspective, because that is where, I mean, a lot of it is, it turns out, about acceptance. And I don't mean by that you have to be careful with that. Sometimes accepting life means pushing back against what's happening. In other words, sometimes the intention is for a person to find their strength so not to just blindly accept where, you know, like a patriarchal kind of reality where you're being abused. Oh, but I have to accept it. You know, that's what Jesus would have done. But sometimes it's like accepting what is there. What is it I am intended to do here? Sometimes it is to have to accept things that are uncomfortable. Sometimes it is because that feels like the right thing to do. Sometimes it's to push back against things that are uncomfortable. That's why there's no rule we can make. It's, you know, it's interesting what you said about the ninth house, because more and more and more I have been telling people, follow your intuition. What's your gut? What's your heart telling you? Because every one of us is utterly, utterly unique. And nobody knows what's right for you. And the best thing we can do, and I have to do it, I have had a history of telling people what they should do or need to do. And I, you know, from my perspective, I am morphing my role more into being a supportive guide through the process. Like what I said about the Sherpas in Nepal. That person's on their journey. My job is to support them, and if I'm going to be an emotional Sherpa, if they're having a difficult time and doubting and questioning what they're doing, not to give them fake pep talks, but to just say, you know, I know that you're having a hard time, and you're kind of supposed to be having a hard time right now, but I know that you have what it takes to get through this, and you will get through it. And we just got to keep going. Sometimes it's just one foot in front of the next for 5 miles, but eventually that ends. And we can't be in the.
I
What's
love
that?
it. I love it. And you know, Caraclo is about holding space for other, you know, for
There you go.
processes to occur.
There you go. And that's what I feel that most of us need, because life is always asking us. Growth is we're being asked to step into things that are out of our comfort zone. That's to me, that's the definition of growth. Because if I already know how to do something, that's not growth. It doesn't mean it's wrong to keep doing what I'm doing, but at a certain point you get the call, like, of how do I know that it's time for a change? Because my life, the way it's worked, starts falling apart. That's what's happening now to me on a large scale. And many people don't know any of what I'm talking about. And so they are saying it's somebody's fault that their life is falling apart. Well, it's life's fault that their life is falling apart because it's time for them to grow. But because people don't look at life as life is growth. The whole reason we're here is to grow. And we have cultures that are based on exactly the opposite of that. You want to hold on to everything you have, and you want to rise to the top of the heap, no matter how you get there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then you're going to stay there forever because only losers fall from the top of the heap. And that is so out of alignment with the way life works and with our natural natures. So all of that is deconditioning, and that's what's going on. This stuff breaks apart one little step at a time. And as I have said many times, somebody forgot to send me the email telling me that my life was going to start falling apart, or else it wound up in my spam folder.
Yeah.
But
Because it was a mass email and
yeah, or I put it in the spam folder. But hello. But this is a reprogramming. In other words, we have to be broken down. It's our conditioning, it's our assumed identity that we have been taught. Most of us were raised by caring people. No, there are many who were not, and I honor that. But most of us were raised by people who cared about us, but their own wounds and limitations were, what is it, the sins of the fathers are
the fathers, yeah,
presented to the sons or something like this.
visited upon
We're
or something like that.
There you go. To me, our deepest spiritual work at this time is we're breaking those chains. That to me is what this 7 generations backward and forward means. Because we're genetically linked to the 7 generations back, when I change my consciousness and I start breaking free from the programmed reality, I'm not doing it for my ancestors. It affects my ancestors and it affects the generations to come. And little by little, millimeter by millimeter, nanosecond by nanosecond, we are creating a different reality. And at different points along that reality, it appears for periods of time, like right now, like we're going backwards. But that's an inevitable. Backwards is retrograde, right? That's the function of retrograde.
Yep.
You revisit. So we have to revisit. And for us, it sucks. But it's part of the process. And life, this is my feeling. I don't feel like our future is in question. I mean, it may stop on this planet. We may screw it up so much on this planet, we can't be here anymore. That's possible. But if that happens, we're going to go somewhere else because we're eternally evolving. And it's not over till we're there. And if we want to take 5 trillion or whatever, put 3 zeros after trillion, I don't know what it is. We can, as long as it takes, yeah, that's what I call it, bazillion. As long as it takes, it takes. So that's what's going on. So as we adopt that frame the way we look at an astrology chart will shift, because we interpret it. This is what I was saying about, we take our present state and project it on the future. We interpret things from the perspective that we have today. How could we not do that?
Sure.
The difference is, if I let go and go, okay, I don't know, when things are not, quote, not working out from my perspective, and I tried my hardest, like, okay, well, maybe, I mean, your options there are to be angry and try harder, to feel like you're inadequate and it's your fault, and it's probably a few others, and some combination of this. But what if it isn't any of that? What if it's the way it needs to be? Yeah, I'll talk about my I guess you could call this Virgo stuff, because Virgo wants everything perfect, right?
Yeah.
So my metaphysical question is, all right, who defines perfection?
Yep.
My example is, all my life I heard about old growth forests. And old growth forests, humans aren't there, everything's perfect, da 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 da. You get to an old growth forest, it's a complete mess. Trees are falling on each other. They're crowding each other out. Little babies, trees are seeking for light and all this. That's life. Life created that. That must be what perfection is, right?
One would
Because
think.
it's been untouched by human hands. Well, what if our lives are like that also? What if they're supposed to be what we call messy? Another one of my favorite metaphors is having listened to a lot of women talk about their experiences of giving birth to children. And almost all of them, and somewhere along the line, will talk about that it was profound. And none of them, I have never heard any of them say that it was fun. And that's an intense, powerful, I guess, Pluto kind of experience. And what if that, even Jeffrey called God is imperfect. I mean, what if what's imperfect is our definition of perfect? What if everything is exactly the way it's supposed to be?
I
And
think
from
it
the
is.
human perspective, right. And from the human perspective, sometimes that sucks.
Yeah.
And that's okay. So it's like, can I learn? And we have to do it gradually, because the search for perfection in a lot of ways drives our whole bloody capitalist system, right? Because it's never enough. There's always more this, more that, more the other thing, more. What if it's enough?
What a concept.
And look at all the neurosis that is created from feeling like I'm not enough because I don't have this, or I haven't done that, or da 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 da. There's listen to Ram Dass at the end of his life, talking near the end of his life, saying, I still have, he's a PhD psychology professor. He's like, I still have all my neuroses. After going to India and doing all this stuff, I still have all my neuroses. I just have a different relationship with them. We're wonderful the way we are. You know what? Take it further. Even the parts of us that think we're not wonderful, those parts are wonderful. It's all as it is to be. Now, do I live from what I'm talking about here all the time, or even most of the time? But this is a
It's
perspective that grows.
hard.
Exactly. And it's supposed to be. It's okay. Why do people climb Mount freaking Everest? They could be sitting at home watching TV or hanging out with their wife or their kids or their friends or something. There's this thing inside that challenges us. One of my spiritual mentors from my 20s used to call it the itch you can't scratch. There's this thing inside. That's what motivates us, right? That's why we're never fully satisfied, because there's always more. Now, we don't have to be neurotic about it. Doesn't mean to live in total dissatisfaction, but that itch, that edge is the growth impulse. That's what it is. And it pulls us eventually out of, and I want to say complacency, but I don't like that word because it sounds judgmental. It's not that. It's like our biology, our nervous system, we want to feel safe. We're wired to want to feel safe. When I feel safe, I feel free enough to be myself, whatever parts of myself I'm willing to expose. Growth is going to challenge my feeling safe because it's different. I'm a Mars Moon Taurus. Hello. You want to make sure I'm cautious about where I'm going. It took me 6 months to decide I was going to Australia. I only decided because I was given an ultimatum. Make up your mind or I'm leaving. Okay. But the point is, that's okay. It's not wrong. It doesn't mean I'm stupid or thick or I should have done it otherwise. I needed to do it that way.
Yep.
And out of that, I learned. And out of 1,000 such things, not that big, but little and big and everything in between, gradually my perspective changed. I came to see, despite my 8th house Pluto, that life is actually deeply, truly on my side. Now, it's not going to feel that way to my personality, to my ego, some of the time. It's not. That's a given. So my question changes from why are you picking on me or why are you doing this to, okay, what is it trying to show me? I'm not getting it. What's it trying to show me? Now, it could take 6 minutes or 6 years or 6 lifetimes to really grasp it. But this is not a race. It's not a race. I mean, we're programmed by well-meaning people who were programmed by well-meaning people with all these expectations and agendas. And that's what is cracking apart. To me, that's what's cracking apart in this time, because they no longer work. I heard, I don't know, it was 20 years ago, I think, I heard somebody talking, and it said, for all the people in the world that are now coming online, like in Asia, that want a Western experience of life, to live the modern Western lifestyle, the resources to allow that to occur would require the resources on 5.7 planet Earths. You get this? In other words, it is impossible. And we keep getting more and more people, souls incarnating. Why are all these souls incarnating? To me, because the changes that are going to go on are going to lead to rapid evolution. And those souls want to participate in that, even the ones that hate it, even the ones that are voting for, at the soul level, the soul wants something different.
Yep. And we're going to get it eventually.
Yeah. Yes. And the crises that are going to come, climate, food, all this, it is out of crisis that people have to change. When you're in Asheville, North Carolina, or near there, and your whole bleeping town is no longer there, you don't have the option of staying the same. That's extreme. That's an extreme example, but it's an illustration. We are being forced to change, and a whole lot of people don't like it and won't like it. But circumstances are not going to allow what has been to go on. And the end result of it is going to be spiritual evolution and increased consciousness. But it's going to be painful. You look at the kind of younger souls that are being born now. Not everybody, but there's levels of awareness I see that we didn't have for decades.
Right.
And when you and I were young, Sue, I mean, this didn't exist.
Mm-mm. It was totally different.
It existed in little places like Greenwich Village and places where weird people lived, and it was like talking about a few hundred people. And in the course of one lifetime, it's spread around all over the place.
Well, yeah, and we
That's
were fortunate
pretty
enough
profound.
to be born during this time to see, both.
Yes.
I mean, we're coming to many of the Pluto and Leos are coming to an opposition, with Pluto going into Aquarius, and it's that doesn't happen very often. I mean,
Right.
Pluto makes that that much
Movement in one lifetime.
Yeah, in a lifetime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So here we
That's
are.
why that's what we're sitting on. And Rob, the younger people, souls or humans, are going to be dealing with these crises that are coming up in the next 20, 30 years. I don't see any way around it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's, to me, these souls are coming in that are more aware to help with this process to move the evolution forward on a collective level.
Yeah,
I agree.
that's what I'm trying.
Yeah.
That's what I'm working towards. That's why I do this work.
Yeah.
I dare say, and I say this to a few people I meet, you're incapable of not doing that.
Mm.
Because that's the way you're wired.
Yeah, I am. That is true.
Well, this has been so much fun. Rob, I know you have your favorite question.
Well, rather than, I'm just like I mentioned earlier, I love reading and knowledge and just more information. And I just wanted to know if there was any books that you would recommend for the audience that you've read.
Well, it's interesting because I was presented to me as books that have inspired me, which probably wouldn't be books that necessarily. And I mean, there's been so many books, but I can barely remember. But the ones I sat down with really are the spiritual books that I've encountered on my path. I didn't talk about it, but I mean, I didn't mention it before, but when I was in California at 18, I had my first LSD experience, and it was very profound. And I had a period of time for a year plus where the main thing I did was have more of those experiences. And I had some very, very profound experiences of love and the cosmos and the universe and all this. And it opened me up to a lot and got to the point where I didn't want drugs anymore. And that was where this commune came along that I went, because they were at the time, no drugs, no alcohol, no promiscuity. We're being spiritual here. That didn't last long enough, but it was like more. So in that commune, well, one of the things I've done lifelong, which is not really probably of interest to a lot of people, but from the time I was 6, I was really into classical music when I was a young child, which I owe to my mother. I used to go to the library and get biographies of classical composers when I was a little kid. I used to play, I don't anymore, but I used to play the piano back then. The the first one that came to me was in the commune. We had a book we used called the Aquarian Gospel of Jesus the Christ. You know, I was raised Jewish, so I didn't know very much about Jesus. So the Aquarian Gospel of Jesus the Christ it's essentially a channeled book from about 1880, something like that.
Wow.
It was by Levi, was the name put on it. And it basically tells the life of Jesus. The guy essentially says he was able to contact the Akashic records and record the life of Jesus. And it includes when Jesus, as a young child, he was 13, 14, I think, went to India and was taught by the yogis and gurus there, who, you know, marveled at the wisdom coming out of this small child. But he learned a lot there. I don't know how you got to India from I'm from India, from Israel, and 2,000 years ago, but
Both be teleported.
probably. Yeah, yeah, there you go. In the 80s, post-commune, and I wouldn't recommend him, but there was this woman named Ruth Montgomery who had been a reporter, like a very serious reporter for mainstream newspapers, and got bit by the spiritual bug and wrote a number of books about this was like the New Age, the time of the so-called New Age. And so those books were very helpful to me at that time. I also at that time got into another guy I got connected with through one of Ruth's books, got me onto Vivekananda and Ramakrishna, which were profound influences on me. And then to some extent, Yogananda also. I was initiated by a genuine, realized woman, India woman, in the 90s. And I did that path for quite some time. It's still a spiritual home for me internally. Somebody turned me on to Conversations with God, if you're familiar with those books by Neale Donald Walsch. So one of the reasons my partner at that time and I came to Ashland was because that's where Neale Donald Walsch was based. I was very influenced by the books. So we volunteered with his organization for a little less than a year. You know, I know him and all this. And it turned out, but then I got into the astrology or EA, and the EA, I find a lot of value in conversations with God. I think it is good for people who are newer in the path of breaking away from the normal, traditional, what EA would call the consensus lifestyle.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I kind of
No,
I've,
I'm going to be tracking down that Aquarian Gospel of the Jesus Christ. I'm always fascinated about, at the minute, I'm doing a lot of research into the asteroid Magdalene that you can see in the birth chart. And incidentally, Steve, yours is 1 degree of Aries. And so I've just been trying to divulge into material to do with, you know, the potential life, those missing years in the Bible where Jesus's life wasn't accounted for. It's like, well, the man didn't disappear. Well, maybe he did, you know.
well, we can't,
Of
we can't have stuff about Hinduism in the Bible,
course not. No,
Um,
no.
and then I'm thinking, well, what have I read in the last 20 years?
Yeah.
So one person I highly recommend is not astrology, but is Gabor Mate. You're familiar with him?
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Of his work.
I consider him just brilliant.
Mm.
And I feel like if you're an astrologer and you want to be doing, because that was some of the questions, what advice do I have for people that might want to be astrologers? If you want to be an astrologer, the type of astrologer that does readings for other people rather than like a studious kind of astrologer, which is also valid, you want to learn some counseling skills. And you don't necessarily have to have a counseling degree. I don't. But how to present information to people. And you definitely, at this point in time, want to become trauma aware.
Yep.
Because trauma affects everything and is really up now. And with Pluto going into Aquarius, trauma's been the buzzword for at least 5 years now, maybe longer, but it's really going to become a thing. And to become educated about how the source of trauma, as Gabor Mate says, trauma is not what happened to you. It's what happened inside you as a result of what happened to you. And I feel like that's a very important distinction.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
we can see that playing out in the charts. And Sue, I'll also say just something. I was in a relationship for 9 years and still best friends with a woman who had studied this modality called Hakomi, which is a somatic therapy, which is very heart-centered and is not talk therapy at all. And she really clued me into a lot of things, and I was kind of resistant to various things at first, but she actually got me to realize it in terms of anything that has happened to us in past lives that is unresolved is present in this life,
Absolutely.
particularly in childhood.
Yep.
And so there is value in some cases of knowing the specifics of what occurred before. I mean, Jeffrey told me some information at a certain point in my life that was profoundly of my past, that profoundly affected me and really stepped up my self-awareness. There's value in that. But in our commune, we were obsessed with past lives, in an unhealthy way. Like everybody there had been somebody famous of their own choosing in a past life that, picture yourself being 22 years old, right?
Uh-huh.
I was Beethoven, I was Bach,
Marie Antoinette.
right. Joan of Arc. No,
Joan of Arc,
I
yeah.
made that
A lot
one
of
up,
Joan of Arcs.
but the gist of it is that's what I came to realize, that we can find the seeds we need in the present. That doesn't make knowing the past wrong or unwarranted. Again, I keep saying to people, should I do this or should I do that? what is your intuition telling you? Do you feel in your bones that you want to have like a past life regression? That this is not just curiosity,
Exactly.
but do you feel called like you're going to get something at a cellular level from this? And if you've got that sense, go for it. If you don't have that sense, I usually do this for cleaning up the house, like when it's time to downsize. Like there are three categories, what I call yes, no, maybe. Meaning, here's all this junk or stuff. Oh, but I gotta get rid of stuff. I gotta get rid of stuff. Okay, well, so what are the yeses? There's almost no part of me that says that I still want this. Get rid of that right away. Maybes, put them on the watch list. No, I'm not ready to let go of this. Well, don't let go of it. You're going to traumatize yourself if you act too quickly and release stuff. You're not. Part of you wants to get rid of it, and part of you doesn't want to get rid of it. So you need a dialogue with those two parts. And then there's the maybes. Put them on watch. Sometimes they turn into a yes, get rid of it, then get rid of it. But just notice your response. So the reason I'm bringing this up about stuff is because I'm looking at it, it's the same thing. I would say the same thing about should I do this or should I do that? Oh, something that's really good is called IFS, Internal Family Systems, which is by a guy named Richard Schwartz or Dick Schwartz, which is of a school of therapy that says we don't just have a self, we have parts. And these different parts are not in agreement with each other. We have been taught, oh, I have a self, and then I'm arguing with myself, right? And this thought is pissed off at this thought, or they're not aligned. His work is these represent different stages of our childhood, our growth, where they're sort of split off into little personality fragments. And they feel at odds with each other. And the work is about, or my interpretation of the work is about getting them to realize they all have a valid point of view and they're all on the same team. So it's like if you're in a group of friends and there's disagreement, you do what you need to do to try to reach a point where everybody is at least agreeable, if not if not truly happy. Okay, I can live with this. So it's like learning the different parts of ourselves. Now, it'd be interesting. It's not, I don't think it's in his work, but maybe it could be correlated. Different parts relate to different past lives that are unresolved themes that come back. But it's when we have two sides, like one wants to get rid of this book over here, and this one is like, there's no way I'm ready to let go of that book over there. And another book that my friend, I haven't even read the book, I just love the title. I get it. It's called Move at the Speed the Slowest Part of Yourself Feels Safe.
Oh, wow.
And see, because we try to force ourselves or make ourselves do things, right? If you look at it in a certain light, that's actually sort of a form of violence. We have a part that genuinely is not ready to do something, and we're making it do it against its will. So we're always going to have what I call Aries parts. All right, we'll pick on Aries and Taurus. I have an Aries North node. and a Taurus Mars moon. There's always parts that are going to be on the leading edge, the ones that are curious and excited and want to jump into something just to see what's going to happen. But then there's other parts that are like, this scares the hell out of me. I'm not ready for this. And so the unconscious response is the leading edge part that wants to jump is mad at the part that's holding back. Would you get with the program already? Blah, 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 blah.
Feel the fear and do it anyway.
Right.
I could never subscribe to that myself.
Well, I think there's something to feel the fear and do
Yeah.
it anyway,
Yeah.
but I think there's like missing a step or two, which is feel the fear, adapt to the fear, and consider the potential consequences, and then do it.
And then make a decision whether you want to do it or not.
Yes. And you want the parts that are afraid, instead of going, okay, picture like a little kid with a 3 or 4 year old older brother. And the older brother's like, yeah, we're going to do this. Come on, come on, come on, come on. And the kid is scared. The little kid is scared. And so the big kid can either shake him going, you're a sissy, you're a wuss, blah, blah, blah. Or maybe if it was an older sister, like, oh, I get that you're afraid, talk to me about it.
Yeah.
And we're going to do this together. And I've got your back. And maybe they need some time to catch up and to allow it to be okay. So that to me is how we move. Because if I'm jarred or pulled into something, that's going to create trauma.
Yeah.
A lot of the time.
The way you've just described that feeling, the difference between both choices, it's just completely, I just felt that.
Yeah.
The difference with
So
the
did
brother.
I. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Did you, just emotionally just felt in a weird way safer with the sister's description?
Yes.
Where you're like, okay. Yeah.
And see, there are brothers who have that perspective, but it's not the generally promoted masculine point of view. That I think is part of the changes that are coming, is better integration of the feminine and the masculine, where the masculine has to realize the limits to that perspective. And then what do you have in these people that are jumping up and down and making all the noise? There's these incredibly traumatized 40-year-old egos that want to control the universe so that they feel safe and special, But I forgot, I had something else, but I forgot.
Well, before we wrap up, I have actually two questions. I have my favorite question to end with, but I'm going to roll in something, another one that we put on the list, but rarely ask. And that is, what do you do in your spare time? And do you have any astrology projects in the works?
I don't really look at, I've thought about that.
I mean, spare time. Yeah, we had this Gemini conversation with Bess the other day, and she laughed. And I said, what would you do if you had more?
I basically love what I do.
Yeah.
And so, I mean.
Well, so don't think of it as spare time, but what do you enjoy doing? And do you have any astrology related projects that are in the works?
I don't really have, the astrology related projects I have in the work are web work, where I have been helping ESAR, as they put it, bring their website back from the dead.
Oh, good.
And
that's great.
I just was made the web person for the upcoming UAC conference.
Oh, lucky you.
So 2026.
Yeah.
So,
In Chicago again.
yeah. So, that's kind of profound.
Yeah.
I just find it very interesting that because I have these two skills, and so it didn't, I used to, I assisted Mountain Astrologer magazine for a number of years with web stuff, but it's, I always thought it was going to fall more the other way, where I was going to be doing more of the actual astrology.
It all
And
it all comes together, and
yeah, and it's to me, it's clearly a form of service that I'm being asked to do because I can. It's very strange during my years when I was really actively doing a lot of astrology and readings. I was very surprised how, and this was a long time ago, so maybe it's changed, but I was very surprised how many astrologers were like computer phobic. Because to me, they sort of go hand in hand.
Well, yes, to me too, but I agree with you. I think there still are some who would rather not deal with it, or turn it over and let somebody else handle it for them.
And which is, I mean,
okay
that's
too.
fine. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's fine.
Yeah.
But so yeah, these things keep coming up. I don't do it very much anymore, but I like gardening, particularly growing vegetables. And
I don't know if you noticed, but in your I love I love asteroids, and I had been using the asteroid Flora to signify Florida during all of these hurricanes, and it just happened to be in my chart when I pulled up your chart, and I noticed that it was between your Uranus and Juno, is it? I think that are conjunct in Gemini, the very end of Gemini. And here, let me
yeah, Juno.
Yeah, I'll share it again real quickly.
Juno's at 28 degrees of Gemini.
Yeah. And so the asteroid Flora was there right there. Oh, that's progressions. Right here.
Was it? Yes.
Right there. This looks like a little flower.
I thought it looked like a key.
Well, yeah, I did too, until I realized that it Flora.
Well, that's interesting. I always attributed it to Taurus, but that can certainly add to it.
Yeah, so I just thought that was interesting. I thought, well, I'll just leave it in there because maybe maybe there's something. And I have noticed that when you do your presentations, that you always have lots of plants around you.
Yeah, I have one, two, three.
One right behind you.
3 or 4 in here, and one in the other room. Yeah, I don't know. I just like having them around.
And you grow
nowadays. Nowadays, I just grow them on my deck outside. I have petunias and what else? Snapdragons now.
Oh, nice.
And sometimes they're beautiful. But I like that. I like to walk. I'm not a gym kind of person, but I really like walking and hiking somewhat. Just being out there, I find it, I don't know, calming, like sane in the dirt.
Movement gets, movement
energy
and nature,
moving, right?
maybe. Yeah.
That's my moving energy. I don't like super hard workout kind of things.
Yeah. Well, Steve, this has been wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We got to know you a little bit better, and it was a lot of fun.
I've enjoyed it. Thank you. Yeah, I haven't, I haven't felt like, I'm not close to doing talks on the EA Zoom channel. It hasn't felt right it hasn't felt like the right time over the last couple of years.
Yeah, that's, you did express that to me. And, whenever the time is right, we always welcome you back
Yeah.
because, everybody loves hearing what you have to say.
Oh, thank you. I feel like I want to close by really honoring Linda
Mm,
Jonson, because Linda really is the one that really gave me the format to go through all these weird changes of how do I take all this strange perspective I have come to and integrate it into evolutionary astrology in a way that is respectful of EA and at the same time is more about life and soul and all that than simply straight astrology. And she was very supportive in that, and I have a lot of gratitude for that.
yes.
So
Thank you. Thank you for that reminder, because without her, we wouldn't be doing this.
No,
right.
we wouldn't exist. No, not at all.
Yeah.
Thank you, Steve. It has
You're
been
very
amazing.
welcome. It's been very nice getting to know both of you a little bit.
Likewise.
Okay.